Hi, in this video I will take you through some example Puppet bolt plans for managing a Dell EMC Powerstore device. We will need bolt and the Powerstore Puppet module installed on our management machine, and then we can list the available plans. To make sure we only list our Powerstore plans, we specify a filter. Let's look at the plan Find Empty Volume Groups. We see that this plan finds empty volume groups, as its name suggests, and it has one parameter called targets, and that's of course are the Powerstore arrays we want to run the plan against. So let's try to run the plan. My target Powerstore device is called SUT, System Under Test, so I specify that as target. And I see the plan running, and it returns one volume group named empty volume group. So let's go into the Powerstore GUI and create another volume group to see whether the plan will start returning that too. So the volume group is created and it is empty. So let's run the plan again. And we see that the new volume group is being returned. So now let's go back into the GUI and assign some volumes to the empty volume group so it becomes non-empty. For example, let's add the small volume to the volume group. Let's go back and run the plan again. Now we see that the new volume group is now not returned anymore because it's not empty. So let's now look how the plan is implemented. So we see that this plan is written using YAML, and it starts with a description, which is displayed when we do bolt plan show, telling us what the plan does. Then there is a parameters section, and we have only one parameter of the type target spec, which is an internal bolt type for handling targets. This can be one target or multiple targets. It can be a group of targets, but for simplicity's sake, we are now testing with just one device. The next part of the plan are the steps. We see two steps. The first step is called volume groups. We see that it calls a bolt task, Powerstore volume group collection query. That task gets all the volume groups from the targets, and it specifies that it wants only the name and the volumes of the volume group returned. Then the second step filters the returned volume groups for only those volume groups which have the volumes attribute empty. Those are the volume groups which don't have any volumes attached to them. And finally, we want only the names to be displayed. And the last part of the plan is the return statement. It returns the empty volume groups which we just constructed. So let's now take a look at a different plan, the Powerstore capacity volumes plan, which lists volumes of a certain capacity. Let's see how it is used. Bolt plan show. So list volumes with more than given capacity. It has two parameters. One of the parameters is targets, as we just saw in the previous plan. The other one is threshold. And the threshold can be a number or a string, because we can optionally specify the unit of the capacity, megabytes, gigabytes, or terabytes. So let's try to run it. Let's try to forget the parameter threshold and see what it tells us. So the plan doesn't start, and instead it tells us that it expects a value for the parameter threshold, which is expected. So let's do threshold as 1 byte and see what it does. Well, it returns a list of volumes, and it shows the capacity of each volume, both in bytes and using the most appropriate unit for that capacity. Suppose that we want to list volumes which have more than 10 gigabytes of space. So we can specify the unit GB after our number, and let's run the plan again. We see that the small volumes are not displayed anymore, and all the volumes which are displayed have indeed a capacity more than 10 gigabytes. Now we can make it 30 and reduce the list of volumes even more. So now we have only 3 volumes displayed. So let's see how that plan is implemented. This is an example of a plan written in Puppet language. The first line, comment line, is the description of the plan, which is shown when we do bold plan show. The second line is extra information about the threshold parameter. It explains that the threshold parameter is the needed capacity and that we can specify it using megabyte, gigabyte, or terabyte units. So the plan starts by running a task, volume collection query, and it basically returns a list of all available volumes here. Then the next step is creating the rows of the table for display. The rows of the table are created by filtering the volumes to contain only those whose size is greater than the threshold. The threshold is converted to bytes first because the size of the volume as returned from the device is in bytes. So there is a function 2bytes which takes a description of the capacity, optionally including units, and converts it to a byte number. Finally, the result is mapped so that only the name of the volume, its size, and its formatted size are part of the row. And then we use the format table function for actually displaying the volumes table using a title, a header row, and the rows we just constructed. And then the last step of the plan is to display a message. The contents of the message is the volumes table we just formatted.